If we today take a very holistic look at the financial industry, then one thing is clear: the margins are being squeezed, and I think that trend will continue. So as a business, as an organization, if you want to grow and be successful, you need to really think what is your future-proof target operating model will look like. Because where you want to be is you want to be in a position where you can do less with more.
Arthur, thank you so much for coming down and taking time to speak to us.
Pleasure.
It's great having you here. Let's start by hearing a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Sure. So my name is Arthur Reiter. I'm a co-founder for Depowise, and alongside with my other partner in crime, Sven Bergman, we run this business. And really, we are a enterprise software focusing on the financial industries. And I'll get into more detail a bit later on. In terms of a bit of my background as well, so I was just thinking the other day, it's quite interesting that I realized that I haven't really worked in Estonia or Tallinn. So it's just only recent that I came back. But I spent around 15 years in London, and when I went there, I was going there with intent to work in financial industry services, and I had really good opportunities to work. I started at a French bank called the Société Générale Corporate Investment Banking, where I really learned about what is the sales and trading of the world. That was a very good experience. Then I went to Americans. I worked for Standard & Poor's for some time. But for the past 10 years, I worked for Bloomberg. And Bloomberg I think it's considered one of the biggest fintech and data providers in the world. So it was an absolutely amazing journey. I had the opportunity to work in London, across Europe, emerging markets. And then I decided there needs to be some changes. I think it was a convergence of different things. You had the COVID, and additional family members coming up. And I decided to come back to Estonia. And Depowise, it really wasn't on the cards. It wasn't something I was conscious of thinking, but rather it was just me meeting Sven, having having and then taking really a leap of faith. And if I look back and connect all the dots, I just couldn't be happier where we are today.
Right.
So that's a few words about me.
That's pretty cool. So tell us about Depowise. Specifically, I'd like to know what's the core value proposition and what problem it is solving in the market.
Sure. So as I mentioned, we are an enterprise software. We focus on the financial service industry. And there are really two domains that we look at. One is what they call asset services, or in other words known as security services business. And then there's also the asset management, i.e. the investment managers. But for the sake of today's conversation, I'll focus a lot on the asset servicing side because that's where we put a lot of effort and we see a lot of demand. And I'll try to demystify what it really is. So if you think of the asset servicing and what it does, as I said, it services the assets, the investor's assets, whoever it might be. And you have different players there. You have, on one side you have the likes of depositories and trustee service providers. You have, for example, the fund administrators. You have the management companies, transfer agencies, etc., etc. And so we have those different players we offer our solution to. But if I take back to the very initial roots, how we started, then I'll focus on this depository and trustee services. And in a nutshell, what they are and what they are meant for within the European Union is to protect the investors' money. So I think you and I, we have a pension. Our pension is being managed by the fund managers. And these fund managers are obliged to have the depository to look after them, to make sure that yours and my money is safe. And so we had some ideas around it, and then we're quite lucky to start working with the Swedbank from Sweden. And Swedbank is probably one of the largest in the Nordics. And the issue there was that there were no solutions out there. And if you think of the core, let's say core three pillars that they are focusing on, one, you have something they call cash flow monitoring or transaction monitoring. That means that all the transactions the fund does, it has to be compliant. You can't just say, I'm going to transfer the money to Cayman Islands and that's it. Then you have the function of the oversight, that's all related to compliance, etc. And then you have the safekeeping of assets, meaning that the assets that they're investing are kept safe. And so when we started working on it, we realized that there aren't any solutions out there. So that's what we thought. But then we had to back up our argument, and when myself and Sven we started traveling around Europe, we started talking to the customers to really validate our idea. Then it was the common theme there was that there isn't the one solution that offers sort of the front to back solution, but rather you had different technologies that offered bits and pieces. So from the customer's perspective, in order to do the entire work, you had to buy different technologies. And that really makes, on one hand, the technology stack really sophisticated, but also it will cost you a lot more. And I think now we're seeing that this value proposition that we're offering to those customers, it really resonates with them. And we're helping to do those tasks, in one place, efficiently, both operationally and cost-wise.
Right. While looking more information about Depowise, I came across this concept that was new to me, and I have to confess that you need to treat me as a 5-year-old because I really don't understand.
That's how we try to explain what Depowise is to other people. It's quite funny. Even when I was working at Bloomberg, my relatives asked, what do I do? And it was always very difficult to explain, the technology and data and how we're part of this, the whole financial ecosystem. But I'll try my best.
Perfect. Okay, so the first question I have is, what is operational alpha, and why does that represent a problem for your customers?
Yeah. So I think in simplistic terms, operational alpha is really the need for an organization to optimize the operational performance in order to increase the profitability. Mm-hmm. Because if we today take a very holistic look at financial industry, then one thing is clear: the margins are being squeezed, mm-hmm. and I think that trend will continue. So as a business, as an organization, if you want to grow and be successful, you need to really think, what is your future-proof target operating model will look like? Mm-hmm. Because where you want to be is you want to be in a position where you can do less with more. And I think that's the answer to your question.
So it's essentially getting to this place where your operations are streamlined, are as cost efficient as possible, and that allows you to just increase margins by just taking control of your expenditure on operations.
Absolutely. I mean, the operation for alpha is very sort of nice word, and but I think as a company you really need to invest a lot of time into it, because it just doesn't help if you go and buy different technologies and then think everything's going to get better, because at least in my past experience when I spoke to different CTOs and C-level executives, if you look at their annual budget, some of them at half it on technology, mm-hmm. so increase costs. But you need to be really smart about the technology, but also your data strategy, how to manage the wealth of data that you as a financial organization receive. Okay, then
help me connect the dots between operational alpha and asset services and compliance monitoring. How are these suite of services that you offer enabling customers to get to operational alpha?
If we look at some of the trends that are happening in the industry today, and it's really by talking and understanding our customers, then it's quite interesting. A lot of them we speak to, what we see is that the business is growing enormously, mm-hmm. And in the context of financial markets, it's not the traditional world of the equities, the bonds, but it's the alternative investments. Mm-hmm. You take the private equity, the real estate, loans, infrastructure, etc. And interesting enough, some of them are saying to us that, look, we have so many customers that we just can't onboard everyone. Right. And then you have the other customers who are saying, okay, in order for us to onboard these customers, we need to find more human capital. Mm-hmm. And what we also know today that there's a very difficult problem with finding good human capital, good specialists. And if you find them, then they become very expensive. So if you tie these two things together, then you have a business who wants to grow, but with their existing sort of technology setup, they can only grow by hiring more people. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, then at the end of the day, your sort of margins will either more or less remain the same, or there'll be marginal impact on the growth. So I think companies are now really open to look at their technology. Coming back to my point, how do we grow more with less, right? And it's not to say that you need to lay off the people or whatsoever, but it's rather how the technology can free up your time so you can focus on what's the most important. It is your customers. But also I think now with the customers understanding that having the right technology in place and the right operating model is that it'll give you the ability to scale, and everyone wants to scale. But also it will give you a competitive advantage in the market. And so I think if you tie all those things together, that's really how we help our customers in achieving this operational alpha, and also being compliant with whatever they do.
Okay. Arthur, tell us a little bit about who's your typical customer.
Sure. So, first and foremost, this is companies within the financial services domain. As I mentioned at the beginning, you have the asset servicing, the asset manager space. So we focus on these particular companies, and the size is really from anyone who's starting up the business to small, medium, and really the large customers of this world. So just to give an example, at the moment we're engaging one of the quite well-established Asian asset manager that has coverage around 11 jurisdictions, and they manage around 250 billion. So it's an enormous number. So if you put that in the context of Estonian GDP of last year, which was 36 billion, it's a lot. But I think what's been really the most impressive for me is if I look back my time at Bloomberg, then it was pretty standard for me to talk on a daily basis with the like of the JP Morgans, the HSBCs, Goldman Sachs, Northern Trust, etc. All the big names. What I didn't expect to happen with Depowise that quickly, that we'll be behind the table with these same guys, right? So quickly,
right?
And just to give an example, one of the customers we were engaging with is a global bank. They have, I think, assets under administration around 1.5 trillion, billion, and these are just out of this world number, and they're looking for a solution for 19 different solutions. So where we started and where we are now, within such a short period of time, I think we're really covering the entire spectrum of different customers, and it's just been phenomenal.
Right, okay. Now, I'm curious to know, what is it that your typical client says about your services?
Yeah, I think you probably need to ask them, but I'm hoping that they're proven and like what we do. But I'll tell the story, which I think will illustrate quite well what the customers think. So when myself and Sven started traveling a lot around Europe, different countries, and started talking to the customers, again, to really understand, are we doing the right thing for the market? Then when many of them we spoke to, a lot of them asked us these two questions. First of all, why we hadn't heard of you? And secondly, where were you? Where have you been?
Right.
So that was a bit surprising for me. I was like, okay. And particularly, there's one customer I spoke to, and I could sense there was a lot of frustration in our conversation. So I'm just looking at Sven and thinking, are we doing something wrong? Does he really hate us or dislike? And I was frank and asked, is everything okay? And then we got to the bottom of why he was frustrated. He said, look, I just signed with one of the other service provider, but having spoken to you, I realized that you guys do all those steps that I need, and I was like, okay. And then he added quite a nice comment. You should really invest into the marketing,
right?
Which we need to do a lot more. So if any of your audience or followers are looking at this, feel free to DM me. Happy to have a chat. But yeah, I think that should give you a sense of what the customers are looking for. And I think the overarching theme, what we also seen from small to medium, even to some large customers, what they all say that this asset servicing domain is being underserviced from a technology perspective. And that's why we're getting in. We're seeing demand, and we think we have the right product, the right fit in the market, and it's now just about growing and expanding.
Right. Okay. So that's really interesting. Then, yeah. So you've really hit the nail in terms of something the market is desperate for.
Yeah.
one of your challenges is communicating that and making it more broadly known that you are now in the market. What have been some of the other challenges that you've found in bringing a product like this to the market?
Yeah, I mean, one challenge obviously is the marketing, is communication, but we are very young, and if I look at where we've gone, since last year, I think it's tremendous. Mm-hmm. There's always challenge. There's a lot of regulations coming out, and you need to be really on top of everything to really filter this down into your product. So you need to be abreast of what's happening, etc. But also, we are, the Clear and Orbis challenge. We are quite lean organization, mm-hmm. So we're not, big. So it's, how do we get to all those places, all those countries, and really start talking to this customer? Because even within the European Union, it's so large. You take the German market, it's completely different to the Spanish market, or you take the UK and Ireland, completely different. So we've given a lot of thought, and given the current setup, we've actually focused a lot on the Luxembourg market. Mm-hmm. And some people ask me why Luxembourg, but I think if you think what Luxembourg is, it's the second biggest destination for the fund domiciliation in the world after the US. Okay. So you have the biggest number of funds domiciled there, and it also means inherently that a lot of our customers are there who are servicing those funds. Mm-hmm. And what's transpired really well is when we start talking to those customers there, then they're not looking solution for Luxembourg. They look solution for 5, 10, 15, 20 jurisdictions sometimes. Wow. So that's, given the restricted resources we have, I think it has been a very good bet for us. Yeah. I think again, the challenge is always there. How to get out, create that awareness in the market. People know who you are, etc. Yeah, that's what we're working for.
All right, that brings me to my next question, because what you're describing is a scenario where there's potentially a really large potential for scalability based on the type of customers that you go after. Yeah. However, we know that Estonia is a small market.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your decision to base the company and start it off from Estonia.
I think it was very simple. Myself and Sven were here.
Yeah.
That's how we got together. The families were here. I think it's a superb location to be in. I'm still surprised and amazed to this day. When I just recently came back, then I look how much effort even the government, the Estonia puts into really pushing the companies out there. Mm-hmm. But also, our knowledge base is at the moment here. And that's not to say there's something change in the future. We're already looking at expanding at different markets, being Luxembourg or being Germany or the UK, or even for the matter the Asian market. But for the time being, we're here. Mm-hmm. It works for us. But again, it's not to say that we have to be here.
Right. Yeah. We were having a really interesting conversation yesterday with Enterprise Estonia, and they mentioned something that I thought was worth just keeping in mind, because they said, well, if you start a company in Estonia, you are from the inception an international company, because it's very unlikely that you will base a company here to service the local market.
It's absolutely true for us. We are here today in Estonia because we are here. Mm-hmm. None of our customers are really here. Right. Our customers are all abroad, so we obviously we need to travel a lot. Mm-hmm. And there's one thing I've certainly learned over the years from Bloomberg, how important it is to visit customers, be close to them, understand what they're doing, so you can help them. So that inherently means that we can't travel every week. I've done that in my previous life. Don't want to go back to traveling that often, but it means you need to have some spots or some places in the Europe where you can start meeting customers on a daily basis. Yeah, that's what we need.
Right. Okay, let's talk a little bit about compliance monitoring.
Yeah.
I still being very new to this whole concept. Yeah. I would think that compliance is fundamental to what organizations in financial services do. Is there perhaps any resistance to letting a third party deal with compliance-related issues, when it's something that is so core to their ability to operate and their license to operate in the markets? And if so, how do you get around that?
It's a good question. I mean, historically, when you looked at the companies, then a lot of them wanted to do everything in-house.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them still want to do in-house. But I think there's a notion and understanding with the customers that, why should I waste time on building something internal when I can give it to other companies who do it really well, exceptionally well. And there's a very good example, we have one of the customers in Luxembourg who's now our customer. But when we started engaging with them, they were trying to build everything in-house.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been doing this already for 1 year.
Right.
But the progress was minimal. And when we started talking and really, showing how we approach the technology, how we do, I think it took them 2 months to put the project on stop and actually trust us, let us in. Because I think what differentiates us also is that we're not only, tech, we actually understand the business.
Yeah.
When we talk to the customers, and it's quite interesting. A lot of times when we see the consultants are coming in and trying to consult on how to do the things, and when we hear what they say, they will understand we have very good knowledge, sometimes even better knowledge than they have. So again, it's having those relationships, building them, and that's when the trust is, because we are in this financial services industry where trust is just, it's so important. And I think that's why customers are now more open, not the small, the medium, but even the large ones.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting distinction, because we speak to a lot of fintechs, and you have all range of experiences of founders, right? You have some young founders with great vision, with great ideas, and a lot of drive, but that have not yet experienced a lot of what happens in the industry itself. And then we have founders like yourself that are deep expert in a particular area. And I guess the difference is that you reach market fit almost like that, right? Because you know the problem, you know what can solve the problem, and you're able to tailor something that is relevant from the get-go.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think at the core of whatever we do is, and I'm going to come back to this point, is really building those relationships with the customers, being close to them, understand, and I think that helped us a lot, and I think that will continue to help, and that's why we also need to be even closer to our customers.
Yeah. All right, let's just to close, tell us a little bit what's your vision for the company, and what role do you expect it to play in the overall financial services industry within the next 5 years?
Yeah, someone wise once told me that planning anything for 5 years it's a waste of time. And I think you look at the overall global macro and the geopolitical situation, it's volatile to say the least. But surely we have a vision. Number one is Depowise to become the household name within the asset servicing space, and I mean the whole spectrum of different companies we service. And if you look a bit further down, there's something we haven't talked a lot about, is the asset management, the investment management. We already have also some customers, and that's a huge space. It's also a very competitive space, so we need to really be smart on how we approach this, what is the product, and how it fits into the market. In terms of the geography where we are, so at the moment the core focus is on Europe, so the Europe, UK, and Ireland. And I know many companies I speak to, they always want to go to the US for obvious reasons. It's one of the biggest economies in the world. For us, we are driven by the customer demand and where we see the opportunity. And what's been quite interesting as of late is we see a lot of interest from the Asian countries. And at first I didn't quite understand, and when we had some conversation, I asked, why are you looking at us if we, at the moment, really focus on the European Union? But again, it's coming back to this, that the European Union is really good at legislating and exporting this. And for example, Hong Kong and Singapore, they're adopting a lot of the regulations out there. So I think it might be the case that we're actually focused on the Asian market, and then maybe at a later stage. Don't get me wrong, US is always very appealing, but again, you have to be smart, you have to understand what is your value proposition in this market.
Right.
So I think that's, I'm not sure if the 5 years, I'm hoping it's going to be less, but planning anything ahead for 5 years is always very difficult.
Right. Yeah. Well, Arthur, thank you so much for spending time with us. You've opened my eyes to a new world that I was not aware of, which is this idea that the European Union is actually very proficient at regulation, and that's something that can be exported and that other countries can learn from. So,
perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.